In the first reading of today, we will hear one of the most beautiful stories ever written from Genesis. It is the story of Abraham and his son Isaac. Abraham was landless. Abraham was old. And even as Abraham was landless and old, he was told by God, he was promised by God that he would have land further than the eye could see and would have children and grandchildren more numerous than the stars in heaven or the grains of sand on the seashore. God fulfilled that promise to Abraham and his wife Sarah through the son Isaac. And Isaac was born. And Abraham could see in Isaac, his son, the hope and the promise that God had made. Yes, because Abraham had a son Isaac, there would be generations to come, and Isaac now would be responsible for the next generation and the next generation and the next. So Abraham could believe that. However, Abraham believed even before his wife Sarah delivered Isaac. Abraham believed even before he could be given the land. He believed before he saw. He did not need to see in order to believe. And now in the text of today, Abraham is told by God that he must sacrifice his son. And obviously, Abraham would have been confused. Abraham would have been perturbed. Abraham would have been disturbed because this one symbol of what God promised me is now going to be taken away. If I sacrifice my son, how will the promise that God has made be real? And yet, because it is God's will, because it is God's command, because Abraham knows that God is always in control, he takes his son to be sacrificed. And even as Abraham makes all the preparations for that sacrifice, God stops him through an angel. It was a test of Abraham's faith. It was a test of whether Abraham would continue to believe. It was a test for Abraham to ask himself whether he needed to see proof or whether he would believe without proof and believe even without seeing, even when something contrary to everything that was rational would happen. At this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are also in this position of Abraham. We are asked by God to see what we cannot see, to see what we need to see, but we cannot. We are asked by God to believe, like Abraham, that God is in control. We are asked by God to believe that God is doing what God is doing for our good. We are asked by God to realize that we may never see and yet we are called to be. Will we, like Abraham, take our own Isaacs to the sacrificial altar? Will we, like Abraham, avoid trying to reason too much? Will we, like Abraham, avoid trying to look for rational explanations, for scientific explanations? Will we, like Abraham, leave what we cannot understand in the hands of God? This is the invitation which each one of us is given today. And so we ask ourselves, will we be like Abraham? Will we have that faith? Will we have that determination? And this determination is shown in the best possible manner in the gospel text of today, which is the scene of the transfiguration. Mark chapter 9, verses 2 to 9. Jesus takes with him three of the closest disciples, Peter, James, and John. And even as he is on the mountain, he is transfigured. His clothes becomes white. His whole face is shining like the sun. He is as if he has risen already from the dead, because for Mark, the transfiguration is a prefiguring of the promise of God. Jesus has already told his disciples that he will suffer. He has told his disciples that he will die. He has told his disciples that he will be laid in the tomb, but he has also told his disciples that he will rise from the dead. Resurrection is still a long way off, but the disciples are given a glimpse of what the resurrection will be in the transfiguration when they see this transfigured Jesus. And that's why, unlike Matthew and Luke, who have the correct chronological order in the two figures who appear with Jesus on the mountain, namely Moses and Elijah, Mark changes the order to Elijah and Moses, and deliberately changes the order because for Mark it is not chronology which is as important as the meaning that Mark wants to convey. By those who read the Gospel of Mark will ask, why has Mark changed the order? Moses came before Elijah. Then why has Mark put Elijah and then Moses? Because according to the book of Malachi, the one who would go before the Messiah was Elijah. And that's why Elijah takes pride of place in Mark's list of the two, Elijah and Moses, to indicate that Elijah has indeed come, and Elijah in the Gospel of Mark is identified with the person of John the Baptist, and so Mark wants to indicate that Jesus is indeed the Messiah. More than that, however, what Mark wants to indicate through his impression of the transfiguration, through this incident of the transfiguration, is that Jesus believed the Father's words, much like Abraham. Abraham was not asked to sacrifice himself. He was asked to sacrifice his son, which was a great sacrifice. Jesus will be asked to give himself up, which is an even greater sacrifice, and Jesus is going to do it without any proof, without any evidence, without any sign. Jesus needs no sign, because all the signs that Jesus needs are given to him in the Father's unconditional love. That is why in the second reading of today from the letter to the Romans, Paul can speak about this total love of God which knows no bounds. As far as Paul is concerned, there is no height, no depth, no breadth, no angel, no demon, nothing in the past, nothing in the future, nothing which has come, nothing which will come, which will ever separate us from the love of God. Abraham was courageous to believe without seeing. Jesus was courageous to go to his death without any proof. We are called today to believe even as we struggle through, even as we face trials and tribulations because of this devastating pandemic, to believe that God is still in control. And that if we continue to respect God's will, if we continue to do God's will, like Abraham, like Jesus, we too will see salvation. Will you, like Abraham, believe even when you cannot see?